All right, the time is 7 p.m. We'll call this meeting to order. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, could I have a roll call, please?
Mayor Pulaski,
Here.
Trustee Berkshire, Trustee Della Penna,
Here.
Trustee Domke,
Here.
Trustee Lanisa, Trustee Perkowski,
Here.
Trustee Trejo.
Here. And we have a quorum. Thank you so much. Move to a presentation of the agenda. Trustee Trejo.
Yes, I would like, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda and move executive session 15 to number 18 and then move the rest up.
Perfect. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Seeing none. Could we have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Seeing none, the motion carries. We'll now move on to Village Board public comment. Anyone wishing to provide comment on a topic or an agenda item may address the Village Board during the public comment or public hearing segments of the Village Board agenda by submitting comments in advance or attending in person. Madam Clerk, do we have any submitted in advance? Thank you. Is there any member of the public here today that wishes to address the board? Sir, please approach the podium and state your name for the record.
My name is Dale King. Been a resident of Roselle for 32 years. Live on Roseman. We've had a problem here in the last 6-8 months with sewer lines. Now, I'm finding out now that we're responsible for the sidewalk out to the street. I never knew that. None of my neighbors ever knew that. Everybody I talked to said, "What are you thinking?" I said, "That is their policy." My next door neighbor just got a bill for $12,000 because of a sewer collapse. I don't understand how that is relevant to their problem. They had no problem with their sewer line. Everything was working fine. The street collapsed. I found it that morning. I drove out of my driveway. Here's a 3-foot by 3-foot hole that had to go 3 or 4 foot deep. The road just collapsed. I called 911. I didn't know who to call. They directed me. I spoke to somebody and I said, "I'm going to sit here until somebody comes out here." "Well, you don't have to do that." I explained 3 times to them, 3-foot by 3-foot by 3-foot deep hole. And they, "No, you don't have to wait." Well, I'm not going to sit there and have one of my neighbors drive into this hole. So I parked there and waited for the village, and a young man came. He was real nice and everything. He'd never seen anything like this. But what I'm wondering is, why are we responsible? And I just went through the street this morning, and everywhere that had collapsed, we have ditches. And those things were flooded. Does anybody think that maybe groundwater is deteriorating the ground underneath these sewer pipes? That's what my opinion would be, because everybody else has been fine. Everybody that has, the sewer, whatever, we have ditches and they get filled up when big rains. Now, I had mine 2 years ago scoped because I had a new driveway put in and I didn't want to put a new driveway in and have to do something with my sewer line, which is what I consider from the sidewalk to my house. I had it scoped. He said, everything is fine all the way to the sewer. Well, I don't want to take a chance on this. I don't have $12,000 to pay out. And neither does my neighbor. They're just a young family. And I don't know about the people down on the next block. There was 4 of them there. And both, like I said, both sides, their ditches were full of water again. I just think it's ground erosion right underneath that street. And we've been, I spoke to you a couple of years ago. You
About the
probably
helicopters.
remember
Yep,
me.
absolutely.
Yeah. And it's like, if it continues up my street, I'm going to be next. And so are my other neighbors. We can't afford that. We just can't. I don't want to take on another mortgage on my house. I had to take a mortgage out for my house for my kid to go to college. I'm not a rich man. I just don't understand why we are responsible for that. have no reason. And when I moved in here, a few years after that, which was like 90, 91, something like that. Granville was done all the way down, sewers, street, curbs, everything. Beautiful, beautiful. We were under the understanding we were next because it was going north. Well, I think in 2008, everything went down, and I totally understand that. But nothing has been done. Yeah, they patched our street, what, last year? They did the scraping and put in, that doesn't do anything. Makes it look nice, but now that it's being torn up again. And my neighbor, where they replaced the sewer line, is in the center of the street. They had nothing going to their house, and yet they still got billed. I don't understand that. I really, really don't understand that. It's just not fair. I mean, we pay sewer fees. What is it for?
So I would say every situation is different. And so without knowing the exact details of
I
what happened.
understand. None
I
of you
think-
guys probably know about it.
Yeah, so I was gonna say, one thing I would just say is, please come over here and give your contact information to,
Okay.
Brian and Jason.
Mhm.
Generally speaking, though, from not speaking to this specific situation, again,
Mm-hmm.
not having the facts, but the private line from your house connecting to the sewer line is the responsibility of the property owner. Same with the water, up to the B box. So when we talk about sewer lines, that's to replace the main lines that run to collect everyone's stuff to go to our sewer treatment plants. There's a lot of different complexity. And I think one thing that we've all recognized is infrastructures and needing additional investment in this community. And so I think one thing that it's not going to solve everything that you're bringing up here today, but March 15th, Wednesday at 7 p.m. here at Village Hall, we're going to be having a very, very broad conversation about how can we start to better finance infrastructure improvements that we need to tackle as a community, because to your point, whatever happened from 2008 forward and whatnot, we've made a lot of adjustments in how we prioritize and pay for projects, but we know that we have a lot of work that needs to get done. And while we have very balanced budgets and we have been very stable in what we're doing, we always push projects off or defer them in order to make sure that we have the right foundation going forward, which at times doesn't necessarily do the best thing for our residents either. So I think that's where we're going to have a broader conversation. But I'd love to have Public Works follow up and give some additional information once we kind of understand and can do some research on this.
Can I get the question answered about how come South Central, I've seen their streets being done 2 or 3 times in
So-
the past 20 years. They've got new curbs again and everything. We've got diddly.
So I will say, I mean, Public Works can probably comment on the process we go through to evaluate pavement and how we prioritize street pavement projects. I don't know if Kristen or Karen would like to address that.
So in 2019, we did a pavement evaluation that looked at the condition of all of the roadways in town. And based on that, we've been tackling, and the funding available, we've been tackling the projects that were those worst streets that needed the most attention. We look at streets that are through streets that have higher levels of traffic than just residents going to and from their homes. So we continue to evaluate our streets and our needs for funding for streets. And we try to coordinate those things with things like water main replacements or sanitary sewer improvements, storm sewer improvements. So we try to look at it holistically as opposed to just, walking down the street and finishing those streets as we go.
We take care of our parkways, cut the grass, we do everything there, we do all of that. And we can, you can't park on the streets overnight, but yet we own it. I don't understand this. This is just baffling to me. I've never lived in a village that didn't own it from the sidewalk out. Never. So,
Different communities have different policies, and we're not the only community that has this
understand.
policy, but I do acknowledge there are communities that do have a policy like you just described. So
I understand.
I would say today, the way that we fund it with our current fees, we could not afford that
Yeah.
policy change. But if that's a priority for the community, we could. It's an ordinance, yeah.
We've been waiting for 20 years for our street to get done. 20, almost 30 years. It's just, we keep getting passed over. Granville just got it redone again. Just last year. I look and I'm going, what's going on here? And they're digging up sewers and everything else. What? We get nothing? We get diddly? I just don't understand why our street You know what I called our street?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would say a lot of times we're making investments in things like sewer treatment and things like that, which I know isn't as visible immediately, but it's being serviced and used by all the residents and stuff of that nature. And those are hundreds of millions of dollars for us right now,
Totally understand that.
but
When you've got an issue that's going on our street within the last 8 months, maybe, you've gotten 2, 4, at least 5. Where, like I said, I drove by those areas. Both of the ditches were full of water. It just doesn't drain. There's no way it can drain. It just sits there. And where is it gonna go? It's gonna go in the ground and it's gonna undermine all of that road. And I just don't know why my next door neighbors would be charged for that. I mean, like I said, it was in the middle of the street that they dug this hole, and it was a massive hole, and put in a new line. You know, I don't know if what they touched on their side or whatever you want to call it, ours or, you know, but they just, and they charge them. I don't understand that. Not at all. It's in the middle of the street.
well, in the middle of the streets where the pipes connect. And so
Absolutely.
that's what our ordinance states. So unless the village board amends that ordinance, that's what we do to all residents in this village right now. So, but I would like to
I'd
get,
just like to know how many residents know that. And I doubt very many of them. I
couldn't-
very much doubt that.
couldn't answer that, but we do want to get the information on your neighbors so we can get you some appropriate information about that specific situation. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do you have any other members of the public here today to address the board? Seeing none, we'll move on to officials and staff reports. I have none tonight. Does any village trustee have a report? Yes, trustee Perkowski.
Thank you, Mayor Pulaski. I have 2 things. One, just another reminder that Flags for Roselle subscriptions are open. Only 2 months left, so make sure if you have not submitted yours already, to do that is available through the website. They're for sale here at Village Hall and at the History Museum. Also, another reminder that the Food Pantry's second annual gala is coming up on April 29th. Tickets are available again through their website and their Facebook page. So 2 very good, worthy causes that I hope everyone can come and support. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you so much, trustee Domke.
Well, I have the honor of making a proposal for our honorable trustee Thomas Perkowski, who will be the star attraction at the museum's Halls of Power, Stories of the Sometimes Ridiculous Trials and Tribulations of National Leaders. And that will be happening at Trinity Lutheran on
You say that 10 times fast for us, Wayne?
please don't, April 15th at 6:30 for wine and cheese. And you get all liquored up for Tom to make his presentation at 7 o'clock. How does that, did I do it the way you wanted?
All right. Any other trustees have a report tonight? Seeing none, we'll move on to village clerk.
The Friends of the Library's book sale is this weekend, Saturday from 9:30 to 4 and Sunday from 1 to 4 p.m. We've got our bag sale again for $5 on Sundays. And otherwise, hardcovers are $2, paperbacks $1, and children's materials are 50 cents a piece. And thank you to everyone that has been recycling their plastic film with us. We have already made it halfway through our goal of 500 pounds at 3 weeks into our 6-month-long campaign, which is quite impressive. And I wanted to say thank you to all of the volunteers like Lydia here who have gone to collect and pick up. If we're going to keep this campaign going, we are actively recruiting additional volunteers for collections and drop-offs. So reach out at hello@greenroselle.org.
Great, thank you so much. Village attorney,
No report.
village administrator. All right, treasurer's report. Tom, how did we do in January?
He's laughing.
Just the beginning of the fiscal year, so it's kind of hard to rate everything.
Crystal ball is cloudy, so to speak.
At the end of the year, we'll have that. So this is the January 2023 Treasurer's Report, which the full report is in the agenda packet. So for the month of January, revenues exceed expenditures by $377,000, almost 378. And really, the revenue of the month was sales tax. That was our biggest revenue for the month, represents October sales. So thinking just before Christmas, we received 360,000, which was an increase of 2.8% from 2021. Preview next month's report, you'll be very happy to see the sales tax that we received for November sales. And also I wanted to point out that the commuter parking permits nearly doubled the sales from January 2022. So again, the monthly parking has been even or sometimes above prior pre-pandemic. The parking permits themselves, whether they be quarterly or monthly, have started to increase once again. And that's even with, there was a slight increase in the price, but that does not, account for the doubling of the sales. And wanted to give an update. The last page of my narrative, I included an update for 2022. So if you want to take a look at that, just revenues and expenditures, just a broad overview of the general fund. So this is through February 13th. Revenues exceed expenditures by 1,541,000. Audit begins on March 13th. So we'll be doing more adjustments up until then. There's one more payout after tonight. And then we just have a few things to record before the auditors come here. And then also on the 13th, we'll have a final budget amendment for the FY22 budget. There are a few things that were approved throughout the year that we just never got around to doing the budget amendment for. But that's the time that, we like to close that out. Also in your packet are the two new funds, the tourism fund and the TIF4 debt service fund. So you'll see those. Tourism, not much happened yet. There's just a little bit of salaries in there. But as the year goes on, you'll see more and more, and you'll see hotel motel tax in there. And those are new in the income statement section, which is in the end of the report. And with that, if anybody has any questions on the report, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions for Tom tonight? No questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll now move on to unfinished business. First, we have the consent agenda. All items listed on the consent agenda are considered to be routine, procedural, informational, self-explanatory, or non-controversial in nature and will be enacted in one motion. There will be no discussion on these items. Tonight, we have adoption of a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of a contract by and between the Village of Roselle and Pyrotechnico Fireworks Incorporated, passed an ordinance establishing the Timberleaf Townhome Special Service Area in the Village of Roselle, Illinois. Adopt a resolution authorizing the execution of a contract in the amount of $1,228,405.07 to Schrodinger Asphalt Services Incorporated for the 2023 Street Improvement Program. Adopt a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of agreement by and between the Village of Roselle and Confluence Incorporated in the amount not to exceed $147,500. That's all. Do I have a motion to approve?
Moved.
Second. Madam Clerk, a roll call, please.
Trustee Trejo.
Aye.
Trustee Domke.
Aye.
Trustee Della Penna.
Aye.
Trustee Lanisa. Aye. Trustee Prokowski.
Aye.
That motion carries. We'll now move on to community development for the Trustee Domke Show.
Okay, man. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to pass an ordinance adopting comprehensive amendments to the Roselle zoning ordinance as amended in 1985 and to be known as the Village of Roselle zoning ordinance of 2023.
Karen, would you like to take it? Oh, say a second. I'm just so excited. Second, thank you.
Two.
I am too.
Or score and
Yeah.
that's what it feels like. Go on.
Here tonight, we have the consultants, David Silverman from Ansel Klink and Michael Blue from Tesca. They've prepared just like a little presentation to sort of summarize all of the changes. And then all three of us will be available to.
Great. Thank you so much. Gentlemen.
Board, it's a pleasure to be here. Good evening. I'm Michael Blue. And we're the consultants. I think we need t-shirts actually to make that. So briefly, we want to share with you what we last presented January 17th at the public hearing for the adoption of the zoning ordinance. It comes down to two things, right? It comes down to the process that we all went through, and it comes down to the documents that you have before you. We'll go through this briefly in the interest of time. I'm not going to read every word on every slide. If you see something goes by and you say, hey, wait, what about that? Slow me down, but why don't we go ahead? We did kick off with a workshop. So there's a public involvement process to this. This is not a turnkey technical sort of study. So there's an amount of public engagement that's part of this. We had workshops with elected officials, with appointed officials, and with the community. So we can go on to the next slide. The next part of the process, phase 2, is our technical assessment. Part of the reason we work with David is it's great to have an attorney to do this. It gives you as a board, it gives your own village attorney a confidence that the document is legally sound. Beyond that is the drafting process. It's an iterative process. We write chapters, we share them with staff, and then we talk about them. And I would just pause here to give a big thanks to staff, to those that were part of the process. Some of you are on the committee, some of the plan commissioners, some other folks are on the committee, and especially to Karen, who read every single word of this thing at least twice to make sure that it's locally sound and works for the village. It's a very important part of the process. And now we are to phase 4 about adoption. So in terms of what did our assessment turn up and what did we look to do? Well, you see these things here. Modernize is a word that we talk about a lot with codes. It kind of comes down to making it easier to read and easier to use. You'll see graphics, you'll see tables, you'll see a more user-friendly format otherwise. There were some technical things that needed to be addressed in terms of how notice is done. The parking regulations in terms of parking requirements were a little bit off, so that had to be dealt with. A couple more on the next slide. State law, again, part of the magic of working with the attorney on this, with David and his team on this, is that being current in terms of what is state law and what has been going on. A couple of things that we added design guidelines. We'll talk about those in a minute. So if we keep going, we can get into kind of the nuts and bolts of it. This is the table of contents. This is kind of condensed from what you had, and it's familiar. Part of the idea of the code is that when a developer or a property owner or an architect or an engineer comes to town, that the document is familiar. So we try and have a familiar format. And so that's what we did with the table of contents. A few of the key changes that we went through section by section. Again, I'm not going to read all of these, but if we go to the next slide, we added a bunch of graphics. Again, it's that simple. And if you turn through it, that's probably the easiest thing to see. And fences were something that we spent a lot of time working with Karen on, because again, it's very personal, right? For all the stuff that is going to happen and continue to happen in town center, a lot of the code is about fences, because that's what really your constituents are calling about. So that was a big part of it. The bulk tables, we clarified some of what is in the R3 and R4. There was a lot of, you can have single family homes, you can have townhomes, you can even have apartments, but the setbacks and the bulk standards were not clear. And so we kind of dug into what was in there and made it a little easier to follow. In terms of the administration section, primarily we consolidated the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Planning and Zoning Commission. We know you all have spent some time talking about it. We would just remind you that this is getting to be more and more common in communities in terms of efficiency and dealing with workload. I mentioned parking and loading. I think the most important thing in there is what we refer to as the reuse rule. So that if a business goes out somewhere here in the town center, and a business that has a higher parking requirement comes in. So if a shop leaves and a restaurant comes in, or restaurants will have a higher parking requirement, they're allowed to do that. This is a huge economic development thing. It keeps storefronts full. To do it any other way is asking for trouble, quite honestly, because you'll have vacancies. In terms of landscape and tree preservation, this was a section that was in pretty good shape in terms of its content. It had a lot of things being reviewed by you all as the village board. I would suggest you have better things to do. The modernization of code is about taking the things that are administrative and having them dealt with by staff. The things that are policy continue to come with you. The other thing that's in here that I should have paused in the administrative section was that minor variations. So dimensions up to 5% of that So think of that, if it's 30% yard, 5% of that can be done administratively, not just by the swipe of a pen. There's still a hearing, there's still opportunity for residents to participate, raise concerns, and so on and so forth. But again, it keeps you from having those zoning variations where the ZBA or the new combined count commission will look at staff and go, why are we even looking at this one? Because there are in fact no-brainer variations, and this is to make this easier for residents as well. Keep going. Like I said, these design guidelines, this is the area that design guidelines will apply to. There was a lot of discussion when we started about the value of design guidelines here in town. It was part of your town center plan. In fact, the town center plan guidelines are incorporated for this area. There are also guidelines incorporated for other commercial and industrial areas. The way that'll work is developments that would otherwise have gone for a special use or planned development or would come before you anyway. The new combined commission and you all will be the ones reviewing this. For elements of it, if somebody comes in for a new awning or is changing the facade of a building, that'll be done administratively. Again, not a new building, something that's already there. The sign code is forthcoming. We're still working on how we're going to do that, and we'll be coming back before you to share that with you. And we're available for any questions or comments that you may have.
Any questions or comments from the board? Trustee
I
Domke.
will say after 38 years, it's about time we had this done. I love the graphics. Love the way you explain some of these things, how you're doing the ordinances, like what we are now, how we are now. So that's all, this is all a plus as far as I'm concerned. It's a beautiful document. I have not read every word, Karen. I will not either. But I think you guys, kudos to you guys. You did a nice job for us.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, I just reiterate all that and just thank you guys. I know the pandemic threw a wrench in a lot of this, but I think we got a really great final product here that's going to streamline efficiencies for our residents and make sure that we can get answers to developers sooner instead of us dragging things out longer and potentially losing exciting business opportunities for this village. So thank you again.
Thank you.
With that being the case, Madam Clerk, we have a roll call, please. Yes, I believe Trustee Trejo seconded.
Trustee Domke,
Aye.
trustee Trejo,
Aye.
trustee Della Penna.
Aye.
Trustee Lanisa. Aye. Trustee Prokowski.
Aye.
That motion carries.
Well, moving on to B9B, I'd like to make a motion to pass an ordinance repealing Chapter 6, Article 3, Division 4 of the Code of Ordinances of the Village of Roselle, Illinois.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, could I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Domke.
Aye.
Trustee Trejo.
Aye.
Trustee Della Penna.
Aye.
Trustee Lanisa. Trustee Prokowski.
Aye.
That motion carries.
I have another motion to pass where am I at? Okay. To pass an ordinance amending Chapter 8, Article 2, and Chapter 15 of the Code of Ordinances of the Village of Roselle, Illinois.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, could we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Domke.
Aye.
Trustee Trejo.
Aye.
Trustee Della Penna.
Aye.
Trustee Lanisa. Aye. Trustee Prokowski.
Aye.
That motion carries.
And I would like to make a motion to adopt or to appoint Hiren Patel as chair, Terry Warlock as vice chair, Jason Wertz, Nimish Johnny, Brian Boos, Lydia Galeante, and Joseph Lewis to the newly combined Planning and Zoning Commission effective February 27, 2023.
Second.
Thank you. And I'll just note, we did invite all of our current Planning and Zoning Commission and ZBA members, if they wanted to continue. Based out of that, we did an internal review. And so we randomly selected people for their terms internally. So as people roll off, we will obviously continue to solicit from the community. But since we were consolidating, I felt it was most appropriate to offer that to the current serving members of both boards, since we're going from.
Group to boot too.
Yes, absolutely. So from 14 down to 7, but I think this is a great group. So that being said, could we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Domke.
Aye.
Trustee Trejo.
Aye.
Trustee Della Penna.
Aye.
Trustee Lanisa. Aye. Trustee Prokowski.
Aye.
That motion carries.
Okay, I would like to make a motion to open public hearing for the amendment to the pre-annexation agreement for 818 Juniper in Medina.
Second.
Could we have a roll call to open up the public hearing?
Trustee Domke.
Aye.
Trustee Trejo.
Aye.
Trustee Della Penna.
Aye.
Trustee Lanisa. Aye. Trustee Prokowski.
Aye.
Notice was published in the Daily Herald on February 10th, 2023, and is on file with the clerk's office.
So this property was one of the sidewalk discussions that we had late in 2022. So I had reached out to the property owners where it was directed to have them make a payment for a sidewalk in lieu of installing it. So 818 Juniper has requested the ability to pay over time. So we've come to an agreement that the full amount due will be paid by July. So the amendment to the pre-annexation agreement sort of just codifies this decision.
So do I read?
Yeah, you can go through everything there.
So I would like to ask if there's any member of the public that wishes to ask a question of the petitioner or the village staff. Seeing none, is there anyone that wants to ask a member of the public or the petitioner wishes to speak in favor of the petition? Seeing none, I would ask that if any member of the public wishes to speak against the petition. No, seeing none. Does the board have any questions or comments? No, none, no comments. Okay. So recommendation, if any to the board, what does that mean, David?
Recommend to move forward as staff has advised.
Okay, so then I would need a motion to close public hearing.
Is there a second? We have a roll call, please.
Trustee Domke,
Aye.
trustee Trejo,
Aye.
trustee Delapenna,
Aye.
trustee Lanisa,
Aye.
trustee Prokowski.
Aye.
And that motion carries.
So I would also like to make a motion to close public hearing.
Oh, we just did that.
Oh, I did that.
Go to G.
Okay, J.
G.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. My eyes are jumping here. I'd like to make a motion to pass an ordinance approving and authorizing the execution of an amendment to the pre-annexation agreement for the property commonly referred to as 818 Juniper Drive, Medina, Illinois, previously referred to as 22 West 324 Juniper Drive, Medina, Illinois.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, can we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Domke,
Aye.
trustee Trejo,
Aye.
trustee Delapenna,
Aye.
trustee Lanisa,
Aye.
trustee Prokowski.
Aye.
That motion carries.
Getting tired, David. But
Halfway
here we go.
You're almost there.
I would like to make a motion to open a public hearing for the amendment to the pre-annexation agreement for 817 Crest, Medina.
Second.
We have a roll call to open up the public hearing.
Trustee Domke.
Aye.
Trustee Trejo,
Aye.
trustee Delapenna.
Aye.
Trustee Lanisa. Trustee Prokowski.
Aye.
And notice was filed in the Daily Herald on February 10th, 2023, and on file with the clerk's office.
So for 817 Crest, he has paid in full. So the amendment just sort of codifies his full payment with the village, and he's no longer out of compliance.
So I would ask if there is any member of the public wishing to ask a question of the petitioner or the village staff. Seeing none, I ask if there is any member of the public or the petitioner wishes to speak in favor of the petition. Seeing none, is there anyone member of the public wishing to speak against this petition? Seeing none. Questions or comments from the board? Seeing none. I recommend the village board that we make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Domke,
Aye.
trustee Trejo.
Aye.
Trustee Delapenna.
Aye.
Trustee Lanisa. Trustee Prokowski.
Aye.
That motion carries.
Okay, I would like to make a motion to pass an ordinance approving and authorizing the execution of an amendment to the pre-annexation agreement for the property commonly referred to as 817 Crest Avenue, Medina, Illinois, previously referred to as 22 West 331 Crest Avenue, Medina, Illinois.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, can we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Trejo,
Aye.
trustee
Aye.
Domke, trustee
Okay, we're good with it. Aye.
Trejo,
Aye.
trustee Delapenna.
Aye.
Trustee Lanisa.
Aye.
Trustee Prokowski.
Aye.
That motion carries.
I don't think I have any more.
You're done
Mr.
tonight.
Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Domke. We have nothing under administration, fire or police tonight, but for public works, trustee Lanisa, could you please cover that?
Yes, I would like to make a motion to adopt a resolution approving and authorizing the submittal of a grant application for the local transportation alternatives program at Irving Park Road, multi-use path and pedestrian bridge.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, could we have a roll call, please?
Lanisa,
Aye.
trustee Trejo,
Aye.
trustee Delapenna,
Aye.
trustee Domke,
Aye.
trustee Prokowski.
Aye.
That motion carries. That is all we have for public works tonight. Finance, trustee Prokowski.
Thank you, Mayor Plesky. I would like to move approval of the accounts payable list for February 27th, 2023 in the amount of $1,845,612.60.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, could we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Prokowski,
Aye.
trustee Trejo,
Aye.
trustee Delapenna,
Aye.
trustee Domke.
Aye.
Trustee Lanisa.
Aye.
That motion carries.
I have nothing else, Mayor Plesky.
Thank you so much. We'll move on to new business. Tonight, we have direction on the draft lead service line replacement policy. I'll have Public Works Director Karen Young come up.
Good evening. Based on the direction of the village board, staff has prepared the lead service line replacement policy. As part of this, we had a lot of discussion about Maple Avenue as it was the first improvement project that would be impacting properties with lead service lines. As part of that, we've sent out a survey to 24 properties in that area that included information about the project and also lead service line requirements and their interest in replacing those lead service lines as part of the village's contract. The initial survey results indicated that 11 of the 14 respondents were interested in utilizing the village's contractor for the replacement of their lead service lines, but it would be pending on what that pricing came back at. On January 30th, staff as well as the mayor had a meeting with these residents. We had 8 of the 24 property owners show up to this meeting. Most of the feedback excuse me, was similarly related to the unknown cost of replacement, but they would wanted some more additional information. So we let everybody know that the first part in that process included home assessments, and we have completed those home assessments. We were able to do home assessments in 19 of the 24 properties, with 5 of those property owners not responding to our requests for that. We had some really good results. We may potentially have 10 properties that may show that they are not lead service lines. In the home, it shows them as copper, but we are going to be going out and hydro excavating out near the end of the property just to verify that. So that was some good results as far as that goes. Our next steps in the process includes bidding, which will happen in mid-March, and we'll be coming back to Village Board in April with the results of the bids. We'll also be working with the property owners in the months of April and May to coordinate with them in terms of what pricing we received and what direction they would like to head, as well as construction taking place through June through August. So the last step in the process was the financial discussion, and there's a couple of bullet points that was in your memo with potential for waiving of fees, 12 months, 0 interest option, deferred payment through the village, and then also some options with a private bank if someone chose to do something a little longer than that.
So any feedback from the board? I know we've had some direction given as far as on the financial incentives or what we wanted to try to figure out from that. And the continual feedback we continue to hear from these residents is the, the cost burden of this and how they can plan for that. So curious with the research that staff provided and as far as what they provide in the memo, what the board's kind of feeling is as far as some direction, because it would be ideal for us to have a policy ready by the time we have bids back to go to residents and say cost and options. So trustee Trejo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so one thing that I had brought up at the time was just some sort of, grant program for especially lower income home residents. So I didn't really necessarily see anything in here. I saw there was a bullet point on financial offering and the memo had some bullets outlined. I just didn't know if you guys were still fleshing that out or where that was.
At this point, I guess it'd be maybe further direction from the board on what the components of a grant program could be and would be from a dollar amount, as well as need-based approach to it. That's very subjective. So we hadn't put as much work into that as our last time we spoke with the board. There didn't seem to be as much of an emphasis on that. And I guess just want to confirm that the majority of the board is desirous of staff coming back with a type of grant program that's need-based, and that it would require certainly additional work on our part to come back with some of that. Since really the initial response from some of those residents was not as maybe overwhelmingly opposed to being able to potentially, handle the cost themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I believe we had at least 4 trustees that agreed to it, but I mean, to me, it's more about looking at real factual data, like, poverty line or something, like if your income's less than, X amount above the poverty line, that kind of thing, like you would get some sort of grant program. So I don't know if any other towns have something similar, that would be like where I would start with. And we could like scale it up where if you're 1 level above the poverty line, you get this much. If you're 2 levels, you get this much.
I think the one issue we're going to have is we don't have access without residents providing that information willingly to us. So we could be shaping a policy that this neighborhood wouldn't even be able to utilize, if that makes sense.
Fair. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't know. Like that's kind of like the unanswered.
So, yeah. So, I mean, I think if that's something that the board's interested in, we would have to ask those residents to provide us their tax returns or something of that nature.
Sure.
And if they don't want to, then I don't think we move forward. But I guess to help us understand a grant program, is that being administered through a village financing mechanism, or are we encouraging them to go to a private lender and then we would give them a grant to take off that amount? Because one way or another, they can't afford it. Who's carrying that burden? Is it the village or is it a private lender?
No, so I mean, if there's something that's like $5,000 and we have some sort of grant program where we would basically shoulder like, let's say $1,000 of it or something, and they would get the rest of it financed through the bank or what
So you-
combination of.
So I guess, so to your point though, are you in favor of the village providing that loan, whether there's a grant associated with it or not, or would you prefer that go through a private lender? That's the big question that I think we have right now that's going to dictate that grant or no grant.
I mean, I'm kind of indifferent, I guess.
Okay, that's fine. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I think that's totally understand and hear your point on the grant stuff. I think what we were struggling with is who's paying for that upfront first and foremost, and then that kind of dictates the next steps. Trustee Donkey?
What I was fixated on is you said like 5 families or 5 houses did not want to go with the program so far.
Well, they did not allow us or did not contact us back to schedule a time to get into their property to assess.
So you think they still might come on board and you'll have 100% of the people wanting to do this?
That I don't know. It's a matter of them
To
contacting.
Lee's point though, maybe those 5 or 4 of them can't afford this. So that might be keeping them from, jumping on this great opportunity to kind of get a good rate because it's economies of scale with our project. So, so the other thing is, and maybe we can answer this with our lawyer here too, is there like, if I'm a homeowner and I reject taking the opportunity to get rid of my lead, do I have an insurance issue then? Because
So-
it was jeopardizing my health when the community was ready to help me get over my, fix my house?
There's only 3 options. You either go with the village and have our contractor do the work and you're paying for it in some method. You're hiring your own contractor to do the work, or you're signing an EPA waiver. Those are your only 3 options. You cannot ignore us and
It's
not.
not our problem, but for the resident that chooses not to do this, are they gonna have a problem with their insurance? Would the insurance be an incentive to tell them, hey, you better do this because you're gonna pay one way or the other?
I don't think it's an insurance thing, but certainly if they were to sell their home, they have to disclose that they have a lead service.
Ah, okay, I wanted to hear that. Okay, that's good. And then the last thing about the 5 people.
Sure.
So, you spend a real nice day away coordinating how you're gonna do all this work, and then you're gonna blacktop Maple. These 5 people can't come in later and now we tear up Maple, right?
Well, certainly they can come in at any time. We could look at putting something in place that they would be responsible for potholing and patching, but the whole point of those 5 properties is it was just for the assessment. So we couldn't even get in to determine whether they are lead or not lead. So maybe they are, in their mind, they believe they don't have lead. So we'll continue to work with
I
those
think,
5 property
if we
owners.
tear up a street after we blacktop it a year later, I don't care how you patch it, it's still It's still not the same.
Regardless of whether they participate in doing their private line, we're replacing up to the B box. The B box should be located in the parkway, so they would not have to go into the street in order to replace their private service line. So
Good point.
That's good.
I've learned a lot about that.
More than you wanted to know.
But Wayne, to your point though, and I'm going to put everyone's feet to the fire on this. I think the big thing here is the village going to be the financer on this for the residents, or are we going to push them to a private lender? That's the one thing that we kind of need to have direction on tonight. So all that's fine, and it will be open and available to all of them, whether they have indicated their interest or not. May is kind of the last opportunity to sign, but I think that's the big thing that's going to dictate how a policy is shaped going forward. So are you in favor of the village providing a zero interest loan for 12 months, or would you prefer that those residents go and work with a private lender to get that money?
At a zero interest with a private lender?
We can't, no, none of the private lenders we spoke with are willing to do that because there's risk, but for that, we spoke with Itasca Bank and Associated Bank, they would provide something subprime, but it's still going to be at a rate.
I mean, how much money would we lose if we gave them zero interest loan?
Well, if they pay us no
What
money,
interest would we lose? How many dollars? A couple thousand? I mean, interest
The
is
rate of
nothing, right?
inflation is.
Right?
Yeah, I was about to say, I think the problem is that we don't really know the cost.
I don't see it in that sense. I think it's more of from a risk and a liability perspective. Are you comfortable being a lender, or would you rather they work with the private sector on that? That's the real question to me. Tom?
What do we do if we're the bank and they don't pay us?
So, I
know there was something.
Aaron, do you want to walk through that?
But not
We've got a lot of people that have their,
A couple of the requirements that we would recommend is one, that they agree to a lien on their property. So that would show up at time of sale, or, in essence, the village could eventually get its money if it were to sell. But not to turn off their water due to failure to pay. And that's how we now get compliance with people who don't pay their bills, is through the red tag and shutting off the water process. So
There's a difference when they don't pay their bills to anybody else and we're the bank. So we could not get our money for 20 years and they
Yeah,
put a lien on their house.
absolutely. Yep. I mean, the lien is only paid if and when someone has money to pay it. And if the homeowner never leaves or never does anything, I don't think there's any way to compel them to pay us. It's really just carrying with the value of the land.
That's why I'd rather not be the bank.
Okay. other Tom P?
I would prefer us be the bank, even with the risk involved. I mean, zero interest loan, we're just losing really the rate of inflation in real dollars. And then if people don't pay, I mean, it happens, but this is probably the best way to get the largest amount of people to comply with it, because it's going to keep the cost the lowest. And I'd prefer finding any way we can to get the lead lines out. I'd rather them do that than sign the EPA waiver.
Trustee Lanisa?
I think I would prefer to be the bank for it, only because we're talking about the grant. You're talking about a poverty level grants, and how can you expect a homeowner that if they are at a poverty level to even qualify to get a loan from Itasca Bank or whatever it might be? I think we have to stand behind our residents and help them out.
Tom P?
Kind of going off that to elaborate further, if we're the bank, then we control the process moving forward. Once they're with a private lender, they run into issues, it's going to be harder to go to a private bank, even with these kind of sweetheart type deals. Whereas if they're running into issues, we're controlling the process. They can talk to us about it if they need an extension, if they need these sort of things. So I'd rather us control the process.
Lee or Wayne?
Well, they've convinced me they have some compelling arguments. Both ideas are okay. You know what I'm saying? But
And to say we offer that doesn't mean a resident has to take us up on that. I mean, it would be the most advantageous to us, but I think we wouldn't say you will only have this option. We would obviously accept full payment and other options as well.
this would be a caveat to this project only, that this doesn't become a precedent for everything that goes on.
I think that's another conversation we'll have to take with the board. I think there's special dispensation we can give, since this was essentially given to them with months' notice about this project, and arguably we can put out a schedule for all these other communities and deal with that. But so I think that's something we can certainly write into it. So, Lee?
I guess, how come we have to do either or? I mean, to me, I could see where a resident would be like, hey, maybe I don't want to lean on my property. Maybe I don't want to go through all this whole process. But I would do it like a zero interest loan, or a low interest loan through Itasca Bank.
They're free to do it. I think the biggest thing is if we're interested in providing a loan or not, right? They can go find financing however they want to, and whatnot. Our partners, I'm sure, would be happy to take them, but
No, but what I'm saying is like, the policy could just be like, hey, option A is you could use us as the bank.
I'd say option one, pay us in full. But
Well, okay, yeah, that's fine. Option one, option one.
start there.
Option one, pay us in full. Option 2 and 3, it's like, hey, you could either, get a loan, no interest loan through the village. You pay us on your water bill, but as part of that, you have to get a lien on your property, and we got to record it with the DuPage County and do all this other stuff. Some homeowner might say, hey, I don't want to do that, but then you say, okay, well, we also negotiated with the local banks here now. Then if you don't want to do that, you could get a low interest loan through Itasca Bank. And then to me, that funding mechanism shouldn't really matter, like in terms of a grant program, because if we come up with a grant program that they qualify for, we would just make a payment to like Itasca Bank or the contractor directly and say, okay, like they qualified for $500 grant from Roselle. If the cost was $10,000, we would cut a check to the contractor for $500. They would have to go and get a loan for the $9,500, and then it's over. And then they have a low interest loan through Itasca Bank.
So
I think it's like all hands on deck approach.
that works. So I guess direction from the board, I would say, is that policy will reflect that we will provide 12-month zero interest loans, and we can shape out what that looks like and go through the mechanics of how that would be done. Or they could seek a third party lender. My preference would be keep it broad, and if they ask, we can point them, but I don't want to play favorites with one lender or another, because I don't want to get into if they have a bad experience, and I don't want to be the recommending body. As far as this, is everyone universally still interested in the grant based on poverty level of some level, shape, or form? How extreme is the board? Is there a point where you want it to be 100% paid for, or do you just want this to be a deduction up to a certain amount to give staff some direction to help shape this?
I think it's awful difficult to be making those decisions without knowing how much money we're talking about to begin with.
I think the hardest part is we won't know until the residents know too, and there's about a month
So I don't know
turnaround.
about
So
making a decision on a policy for a grant until we know that.
it's fair. I don't know if we could get that to the residents' hands so in time, I guess is my point, because we'd have to approve something. But we can do some research, see what we can find. And I think the grant might just be an open-ended thing at least that this board's gonna have to be comfortable with.
We could come up to see what everyone thinks of, say up to $1,000 or up to $500. Everyone's on board for having a limit, what that would be. And if it's less than that, then it's less than that.
Sorry, Tom.
I'm going to assume I'm alone on this. I'm okay with exploring the possibility of going up to 100% in the most extreme circumstances. So if, there's a situation where you have like somebody on a senior freeze, fixed income, those types of things where it's simply not feasible, then I think it's something that it should be on the table, at least, even if we don't end up going with it, to explore.
Lee?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not totally ruling that out either. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know what we're dealing with here. So yeah, you would have to get their tax returns. They do need to show their level of need. I mean, if they don't want to do that, that's fine, then they don't qualify. But like, to me, I think if someone is truly on a fixed budget and they have no money, I mean, like, I think it's incumbent on us to take a look at it and figure out like, do we go up to 100% or not? Or do we do a to your point, like a limit, like no more than $5,000? I'm not 100% sure on that. And then just circling back to like the third party lenders, I'm not necessarily saying play favorites, but if we've already talked to Itasca Bank and Associated Bank and they're both willing to do below market rates, I mean, I think that should be called out that like, hey, we negotiate with these two banks. Obviously, they're free to go to, any other bank that they want and pay like the market rate. But I think if we have that opportunity where we had already negotiated with two banks and they're willing to make that, subprime offer, I think it should be notified to the residents that at least they know that. And if they don't want to take an option that they could do, they could put on their credit card if they want, they could do whatever they want, but like.
Some of these might be our credit card offers, they're not loans. So.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. So whatever it is, but I think if the local banks are up to it, and if more banks want to jump on, that's great. Like, and say, hey, we're going to give you lower rates. Here's like the options, but I think it should be sort of like an all hands on deck approach of payment.
So it sounds like we don't have any guardrails we're willing to put on it now, so we can provide the most flexibility from a policy standpoint, and we'll revisit that. But I think we've got enough direction. I would hope from a staff perspective, at least start working through the financing pieces, and we can at least share some valuable information with residents right off the bat to help ease their concerns. I think the grant conversation is going to be just very difficult from a turnaround time, but also the fact that we will not know if we will have qualified recipients. I think that's the other thing that I'm just totally agree with the conversation here. I think we could create a policy that benefits no one easily, or they don't need the assistance. It's just hard to tell. So I think that's gonna be the hard part. So. Do you have enough answers? Okay, thank you.
Just barely enough.
I do. It's perfect. Thank you.
No, I think it was a great conversation, so I appreciate that. We'll now move on to executive session. Do I have a motion to convene executive?
So moved.
Yes, we will adjourn from the executive session. Thank you.
Let's call for public comment.
Perfect. Is there any member of the public that wishes to give another comment to the board at this time? Seeing none, thank you. So then we'll take a motion to convene executive session.
Moved.
Second.
We're going to go into executive session to discuss real property, purchase of real estate property, and then personnel compensation of an employee.
And you'll be
And we'll be adjourning from that closed session. Could we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Trejo,
Aye.
trustee Delapenna,
Aye.
trustee Domke,
Aye.
trustee Lanisa,
Aye.
trustee Prokowski.
Aye.
No, thank you.